Hello, everybody. We will get started in just a moment here. All right, seeing as it's 3 p.m., we'll get moving. This presentation will likely be about somewhere between 20 or 30 minutes, and then we'll reserve the rest of the time for Q&A. We'll be keeping tabs on the questions that you're putting in the chat. So if you have questions that come up as I'm moving through, just pop those in the chat and we'll get to them at the end and move you over into the participants if you want to vocalize your question. So thanks, everybody. Let's dive in. I'm pleased to present to you the Eagle County EV Infrastructure Plan Community Presentation. So just a little bit of what we're going to go over today. We are going to review our community sustainability goals and the commitments that we have signed on to. We're going to go through the meat of the plan. So we're going to talk about some of the projections for both Eagle County and the state of Colorado, as well as the mapping tool and the strategies. We are going to talk about plan implementation and funding and what we're hoping to do with this plan. And then we will reserve that time for audience Q&A. So to root us into our goals, this is Eagle County Community's goals for climate action. We want to see 50% greenhouse gas emissions reductions by 2030 and 80% emissions reductions by 2050. Basically, all of our communities have signed on to this, and this is really the backbone of the work that I'm presenting to you all today. So this is a snippet from our climate action plan from our transportation section, and I want to focus on that first immediate priority action up there. These were modeled by Western Colorado State University for their ability to drive down our greenhouse gas emissions. So we know, as we can see on the right-hand side, that if we achieve this immediate priority action, we will reduce our emissions by the amounts that we're seeing in this graph. And what this priority action calls for is a 2% increase in EVs each year as a percentage of all registered vehicles in Eagle County. So this is incremental. It's 2, then 4, then 6. It's not just a static 2% until 2030. So where are we at with our emissions right now? As of 2021, across Eagle County, transportation was our second largest source of emissions, ground transportation at 42%. And predominantly that 42% is coming from single occupancy vehicles. We know that within our community, we are quite car dependent. So the more that we can electrify those vehicles and then pull in that renewable energy from our grid to charge those vehicles, we will be driving down emissions. We're seeing similar things at the state level. At the time of creating this plan, this was the most recent energy inventory that I could find. And transportation is also coming in as the second largest source of emissions throughout the state. So a little bit about this project timeline. Eagle County government funded this project to be completed in 2022. I was being onboarded towards the end of May, and so there was a little hiccup in getting that head start for the 2022 year. Research and planning began that summer of 2022. We then created the EV task force. So we reached out to our transportation working group and each of our communities here in Eagle County to ask for participation and community representation on the task force. We also brought in the utility, so Holy Cross Energy, and we had a couple other EV experts that work for nonprofits and other organizations that would be really helpful to this effort. So the task force got together and came to consensus on key decisions over the course of 4 separate meetings. Writing for the plan then began by CAC staff in January of 2023. The plan then went through 3 different rounds of editing, first from the task force, then from the larger transportation working group, and then from the CAC board. And then it was sent off to our marketing team to be completed by the end of April of 2023. So just want to give a lot of recognition to the folks that were on the task force and that assisted with the decision-making involved with this effort. We had representation from Town of Avon, Clear, Town of Eagle County, Town of Gypsum, EV Connect, Holy Cross Energy, Town of Vale. Special shout out, I don't think that they're on this webinar, but to Amy Keeley and Scott Fleming. The Eagle County GIS was a really huge part of this effort, especially as it related to the creating of the maps. So they were a big help. And then we also did the writing inside. So what did the process look like when we were in our task force meetings? We wrapped this project up, as I mentioned, over the course of four meetings throughout last fall and winter. During our meetings, we were deliberating on the following: both the vision, purpose, and goals for this document, really defining the scope. Early on, it was a big question: do we go big and focus on multimodal, fleet, and personal EVs, or what's the scope of this? And we ultimately decided to pare it down to just personal EV infrastructure, just due to the simple urgency of needing this infrastructure within our community. We also deliberated on the projections that we're seeing in our community and that we want to see, as well as those EV to plug ratios that I'll get to. And then we created some strategies related to funding, infrastructure, and education. Editing and improving the final plan was also something that the task force was involved in. So first, to center us in the vision of the plan, the Eagle County envisions a future where electric vehicle charging infrastructure is highly reliable, accessible, and sufficiently widespread to support a multimodal, all-electric, and clean energy powered transportation system. We wanted this vision to be more aligned with our single occupancy vehicle EV infrastructure focus, but really felt it necessary to talk about multimodal and shared and human-powered transportation as well. The purpose of the document that we're presenting here today is to provide Eagle County governments, businesses, organizations, and citizens with resources, guidance, and recommendations to support the EVSC necessary to meet the EV adoption goals of the Eagle County 2020 Climate Action Plan update. We really wanted to root the purpose of the document back to our Climate Action Plan goals. And then the three goals that we created for the document were both related to infrastructure funding and education outreach. And those are to ensure EVSC infrastructure is equitably and strategically located to support broad usage and adoption of EVs at rates commensurate with the CAP goal. That second goal is to position Eagle County governments, businesses, organizations, and citizens for increased funding opportunities related to EVSC infrastructure and EV adoption. And three, to increase education, outreach, and awareness of EV and EVSC technologies, reliability, costs, benefits, and environmental impacts. Okay, getting into some of the projections. So the state of Colorado in their transportation work has determined a goal to see 940,000 EVs registered by 2030. Excuse me. This requires maintaining a 50% plus annual growth rate in EVs. The state is actually doing really well on this goal. So as of December 2022, Colorado had nearly 69,000 EVs registered, which was almost triple the expectations for 2022, as we can see depicted in this graph. For Eagle County, we definitely have a bit of work to do. Our goal, once again, is related to that climate action plan priority strategy. So 2% increase in EVs as a percentage of registered vehicles in Eagle County in 2030 and a 5% increase until 2050. So at this point in time, we would have liked to see nearly 3,000 EVs registered in our community. And as of December of 2022, we only had 902 EVs registered. So our actuals are much less than our goals for 2022. And this is where we hope that the plan comes in and assists. This really emphasizes the need and the urgency of this plan and this resources in our community. So why aren't we to our goal by now? The state's doing really well overall. Why haven't we met this threshold that we wanted to meet by now? Well, we are chalking this up to a lack of sufficient and widespread charging infrastructure in critical areas. Survey data is showing that lacking EVSC is a key barrier that is cited by survey respondents to EV adoption. So with this plan, we decided to take an if you build it, they will buy it approach. And that's really emphasizing that infrastructure piece, but not just infrastructure in general, right? We want to see public plugs. We want to see plugs at businesses, multifamily housing developments, and in key areas and key charging deserts across our community. So as for charging projections, the graph that we're seeing here came from the Colorado Energy Office. And these numbers are what the Colorado Energy Office says that Eagle County needs in order to meet the state's goal of 940,000 EVs by 2030. So we're seeing, 575 workplace, we're seeing some public level 2, and then some corridor chargers. However, within our task force, we decided that these numbers weren't really aligned with our needs and weren't maybe enough chargers as we thought that we needed, based on our proximity to I-70, our tourism-based economy, what our neighbors are recommending. We did a lot of looking at other plans that are being pumped out locally, and also just our desired preparedness for an influx of EVs. We want to be able to support that with infrastructure. So therefore, we still include these numbers in the plan, but we really recognize these as the bare minimum of EVSC needed within our community. And that led us to adopting some of our own metrics for EVs to public plugs. So as of December 2022, in our community, there were only 106 public charging plugs. Therefore, we decided to recommend an ambitious proposal of 12-to-1 EV to public plugs within the community. This decision was made based off of what our neighbors were recommending, what we thought was sufficient for our community. But I do want to emphasize that this is a guiding ratio. It is malleable. We'll continue to revise this ratio and our progress towards it as we look more closely at EV adoption and charging utilization trends. Based on this ratio, that would mean that we would want to see about 250 public plugs by 2022. So we definitely hope that with this plan, we start to see an uptick in EV infrastructure installation. So the next big piece of the plan is the mapping tool. If you have two screens up and you're able to, I really encourage you to pull out the plan right now as we're talking and explore those mapping tools, or do so in your free time. This was, a big lift for us staff in creating the maps, and I think that this is one of the one of my favorite pieces of the plan and what it can do for our community. So the reason we created the mapping tool is based on this understanding that not only do we need more chargers in our community, but we want to ensure that they're equitably and strategically placed. So that is why we developed the mapping tool. And I do want to share that these maps convey several important things. So I'm not going to go and demonstrate the interactive maps right now, but just from the static screen grab, we can see that those purple icons demonstrate current level 2 charging ports. And then the blue icons are DC-FC charging ports. Those numbers came from Evaluate Colorado, which is what the state of Colorado uses to keep track of EV charging and EVs within the state. And then we are also seeing that government-owned parcels are going to be denoted in red, commercial parcels in blue, and multifamily parcels in that purplish pinkish color. And I'll go through what that means in just a moment. So in order to create these maps, we had to determine a set of siting criteria. Now, the siting criteria are really, guiding things that we can think about that tell us, exactly where we want these EV chargers to be placed. So the multifamily that we're going to be seeing in red includes everything from duplexes and triplexes to large multifamily housing units to manufactured homes. That's all denoted in those red parcels that you can see on the maps. And then for commercial, which is in blue, we pulled for things like merchandising, lodging, offices, recreation, commercial condominiums, so businesses and condos. Those are all going to be denoted in those blue parcels. And then government-owned properties in that purplish pinkish color are going to be things like administrative offices, parks and rec, and higher education institutions. We pulled for all of these different criteria and then had County GIS create these parcels for us. And we will be updating the current charger overlay that I was just showing you back here. Every single year, we're going to pull that data, that new data from Evaluate Colorado, give it to the County GIS team, and then they will update on the back end these maps for us so that way we can make sure that they're as up to date as possible in reasonable time. So the key features, as I mentioned, are going to be those level 2 and level 3 chargers. But not only is that showing us where the current chargers are, we're also seeing where chargers aren't. And so those are really going to be depicting charging deserts as well. And then those priority areas that we've identified based on siting criteria. So a noting about the mapping tool, those current chargers will be updated year over year. CAC staff, so Will Brar and I are the point people for these maps. We can fix things on the back end and the links will stay the same, which is the awesome part about having these interactive maps. So if you ever notice any inaccuracies or you're like, oh, this should be changed or what have you, please contact us and we will make sure that those get changed. Okay, the last big piece of the plan that we want to go through today are the strategies that we developed. Now, we did this by breaking out our task force into 3 separate groups based on everybody's specialties to focus on those infrastructure funding and education outreach goals. So the strategies that we see here today are helping us meet those goals that we talked about at the beginning of this presentation. The strategies are meant to provide this guidance on increasing EV charging and adoption. So strategies, are useful for everybody from local government staff to citizens and organizations that can help with education and outreach. We encourage you to take a look at these strategies and see which ones make sense for your organization or entity and think about adopting those strategies. We are always here to support with that adoption and would love to, and that's a part of our implementation plan. So first, to touch on some of these funding strategies, and these tables are coming from the appendix of our EV infrastructure plan. So in the actual plan in the strategy section, you can see a very detailed description of what that strategy is calling for, resources that might be pertinent to that strategy, the supporting entities, things like that are found in the actual plan. This is just the table from the appendix. So if you want to remind yourself, you can look at that funding goal up at the top. But this first strategy is creating an inventory of funding resources. So this is done. This is on CAC's website. You can find it on our website under the Transportation Working Group dropdown and then the EV funding dropdown, and you'll see all that information there. And just a note about the icons, so the black check marks mean that they're done, and then that blue symbol means that it's in progress. And if it has nothing next to it, it means that it hasn't been started yet, or we aren't aware of that work being done just yet, but we should probably get on that. The second one is offering supplemental funding for EV charging installations. I want to give a big nod to the county here because they have already implemented this strategy. So this is really just the idea that our local governments can be providing gap funding. You know, as local government entities, they might not have discretion to install chargers everywhere. If it's a business's property, if it's a multifamily property, the government can't just go in and install that charger. That has to be that landowner or HOA or whatever entity might manage that property. But what our local governments can do is provide gap funding. So if you get a charge ahead grant, you know, they only provide about 80 to 90% of those costs. And sometimes that extra gap, that 10% or so, can still be a lot of money for community members. And so providing extra funding and having funding available for community members to apply for, to pull that project to the finish line is going to be very helpful. The county is doing this through the EV Accelerator program, which is offered for the whole county, of course, with special stipulations. Kate Kirkman is the contact to reach out to on that if you'd like to learn more or see if your charging project applies to what their program can offer. But we definitely want to be encouraging our other local governments in setting aside funding for this very purpose. The next strategy here is offering local grants for EVSE installation projects. So this is based on the idea that while many of us have received charge ahead grants, they don't get awarded to everybody. And so what our local governments can do is set aside specific funding to offer grants for those that might have been denied from a charge ahead grant or other grant mechanism. Financial modeling. So this was based on the idea that it can be really hard to determine how much budget we need to be setting aside for EV chargers. Financial modeling for EV charging is very difficult because it is very, very site specific on how much that EV charger will cost to install. Sure, we can think about the charger alone, how much that might cost, but when you think about adding electrical capacity if needed, if you have to crack concrete and get into the ground, that's going to add up. So what we decided to do, instead of create any sort of calculator that could, calculate or give you that estimate, was to think about local case studies. So thanks to those of you that have given me those local case studies, we've started compiling them. This is in progress, but will be released soon. And this really just shows us, what were the specific, elements of that project that lent to it costing as much as it did. How much did it cost before grants were applied? How much did it cost after grants? I've been sharing these case studies as I've been giving presentations to our community members. And it's been very helpful for them to gauge just how much EV charging can cost, as well as just the variation in that cost itself. So once this is completed, we will make sure that that document gets out to community members and is housed on our website. And this last one is coordinating with electric utility providers. So Holy Cross Energy, and I'm sure XL Energy, can do some site-specific analyses for you. If you are a local government, it is, somewhat sensitive information. And so I do believe that they're asking that local governments approach for this information. But they can tell you where certain capacity exists within our community. And so if you're wondering, where can I install a charger without having to add that extra electrical capacity and load, Holy Cross or XL would be a great avenue to go to. And that would end up reducing your costs as well, because if you're able to complete that analysis, overlay that with our priority area maps and see, oh, hey, we need a charger here and the capacity already exists, you're ultimately going to save yourself on costs. So the next set of strategies are related to infrastructure, and these are all in progress, which is great. If you want to remind yourself of that goal, it's up top. So requiring installation of EV charging in all new construction and large renovations. This is in progress through the Eagle County Code Cohort. So some of our communities do already require this for new construction. Those would be Vail, Avon, Basalt, and Minturn, who all have EV readiness at this point in time. We are currently working with Town of Eagle and Eagle County to bring their code update forward and make sure that EV readiness is in their code. This next one is incentivizing EV charging in local development codes. So this is otherwise known as a development bonus. So if you're a planner, this is for you. You can waive or modify some development restrictions in exchange for providing an added public benefit, such as EV charging. So one way to do this would maybe be reducing the required commercial parking spaces that are necessary in exchange for more EV spaces than code requires. We know that planners at Town of Avon are utilizing this mechanism. We recently went to the Recode Eagle meeting and provided the suggestion that they think about adding this development bonus into their planning and zoning process. And so local governments, this is something that you can do to make this process a little bit easier on developers. Codifying EBSC requirements in areas that fall outside of traditional zoning laws. So this is really relevant for special district, metro districts, PUDs. If you have and are able to do any of your own zoning where you can require certain EV charging spaces and new construction and things like that, we ask that you're mimicking those local town codes for EV readiness. So that way we're future-proofing as much as we can across our community. Streamlining the permitting process for EV chargers. We can waive permit fees and create a streamlined separate application for EBSC. So planners, this one's also for you. This also makes it a little bit easier on the developers and incentivizes more EV charging. And the last one, coordinating with electric utility providers to make sure that we are understanding where that electrical capacity exists. Okay, education and outreach. So this first strategy is design, publish, and maintain materials that promote EVs and EVSE technologies. This information is currently housed on the CAC website. So if you go to our website under transportation, electric vehicles, and that drop down, you can find everything from EV makes, models, ranges, different costs, what chargers are available, rebates for purchasing, dealerships, mechanics, all sorts of information. We know there's a lot of websites and information out there, so we did our best to compile the information that felt most applicable to our community. Hosting hands-on EV events. This has been happening for many years within our community, which is great. You know, we do have our EV Ride and Drive this Sunday, May 21st. So we hope to see you there. That is the strategy in action. At that EV Ride and Drive, we will have an EV 101 workshop from 2 to 3 p.m. hosted bilingually, which we're very excited about, hoping to bring some of our Spanish-speaking community members in and learn more about EVs. And then the demonstrations will be going on from 3 to 6 p.m. for both EVs and e-bikes. We are hoping to do a fleet education roadshow this fall, so we want to continue to kind of up the ante on these hands-on EV events and making sure that we're involving fleet managers and other contexts and not just you know, general community members that might decide to purchase their own EV. Developing roadmaps for EV infrastructure installation. So there are a lot of different steps that you might take depending on your role and what your relationship is to wherever you're trying to install an EV. These are also in progress. We have created one for businesses that we will be presenting at the Actively Green workshop on sustainable transportation. And so this is really just a step-by-step process for business owners to go through. We will be creating a multifamily HOA roadmap that will outline those steps for multifamily HOA residents or leaders. Single-family homeowners is another context that we could create a roadmap for. So just wanting to make sure that we're making this information in this process as easy as possible for our community members. And then this last one is educating businesses and encouraging workplace charger plans. So this is also in progress. CAC will be presenting to the Actively Green Sustainable Transportation Workshop coming up on June 14th. So we'll be talking to businesses about this plan, the elements of it that are most applicable to businesses, but mostly giving them information on how to apply for grants and funding to install their own EV chargers and making sure that they have the information necessary to do so. We'll also be handing over a survey that they can use to give their employees to understand what those charging needs might be. We'll be presenting to the Eagle Chamber in July as well and hope to keep spreading this word to local businesses. Okay, so plan implementation. Now we have this wonderful plan, and what are we going to do with it? The first step here is really doing presentations like we're doing right now, making sure that community members are aware of the information that is now available to them and the strategies that are now available to ensure that we're future-proofing. We have confirmed or already presented to the organizations that you're seeing on this slide, along with more, and I would just encourage you to reach out if you'd like to see a presentation on this plan to your organization. So what are we doing in presentations to local governments? Well, we're presenting the climate action plan and local sustainability goals related to that community. We are also providing that information on projections and really driving home the need for more chargers to incentivize that EV adoption. We're doing a map analysis for each particular community. So we're looking at the maps that we have created and using our local knowledge of where those charging deserts might be to provide recommendations on priority areas that specific community should focus on for EVSE installation. And then we're also providing funding and budgeting information. So providing them a conservative estimate of how much they should set aside if they were to go through with all the installs that we recommend within the map analysis that we provide them. And providing information on local grants and things of that nature, and also offering ourselves as grant support if they need it. We are highlighting the applicable strategies for each entity. As you all just learned about, some of these strategies are things that CAC can take the lead on, or other organizations can take the lead on. Some of these strategies fall much more in our local government or our utility buckets. And so making sure that we're highlighting the strategies that each community could be doing to further incentivize EVSE and EV adoption, and also making sure to celebrate them if they're already doing some of the things that are listed within our strategies. Then we make sure that we get a pulse on future EVSE installations. So we're asking questions like, do you plan to install any EV chargers through the end of this year or next year? Have you set aside budget to do so? This is how much we recommend you set aside, things like that. And then handing over those relevant resources. So some of the next steps related to the plan implementation. CAC staff will be assisting with grant applications. We're especially hoping to do this for businesses and multifamily property managers or understaffed local governments, those that might not have the staff support to be filling out charge ahead grants. We want to make sure that we are making the process as easy as possible, particularly for those businesses and multifamily property managers who aren't as familiar with this work or what the process looks like applying for a grant. CAC staff in the transportation working group will also be assisting with strategy implementation. So circling up with our community members in those primary entities and making sure that these strategies are getting completed. We're also going to be tracking the metrics on EVSE installation, EV adoption, and then that strategy completion piece. Are you ready? Okay, I think it's time for Q&A. Will, do you want to go ahead and list off what you're seeing?
Yeah, well, we have no questions as of now.
Oh, okay, great.
So if folks have questions.
Those were all your comments.
Yes, and I realized that my comments only went to Gina and I didn't have a way to send them to everyone in the group. But if folks have comments, they can put them in the Q&A little tab at the bottom and I will read them off to Gina and we can get answering them. I am not seeing any questions. I guess you just did that comprehensive of the job, Gina. Oh, we got one. Fantastic.
Nice.
Oh, Kim Schlepper just says no questions, but thank you for a great presentation, or thank you for the presentation and overview of the plan.
Oh. Thanks, Kim.
And here we have a question from Ben Clymer. He says, hi, nice job, Gina. Do we know the current rate vehicles are being replaced with new vehicles in the county?
The current rate vehicles are being replaced with new vehicles. Can you elaborate on what you mean by that question?
I don't know if Ben has a way to elaborate without making him a analyst, but my guess is that like, how long is a car on the road before it gets replaced with a new vehicle? And I don't know if we have that answer.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't have that answer.
Yeah, I don't know if we have that answer. And I mean, if you're talking like fleet turnover and things like that, I guess we aren't necessarily telling people to get rid of their brand new gas-powered vehicles with an EV, but as your vehicle is coming to its end of life, it's absolutely something that you want to be thinking about. Thank you, Stefan.
Yep, Stefan just answered, so it'd be 10 to 15 years. Thank you, Stefan. All right, we got another question. Will, you may be able to allow people to talk?
If you click answer live, I think it allows them. Oh wait, no, never mind.
No, it doesn't. All right, Lynn Brooks asks, is there a standard for how many public chargers should be available per registered EV, level 2, level 3?
So within let me see if I can go back to that, the graph that we had shared. So within the state of Colorado's EV plan goals, they did parse out their EV to plug ratio for us. And I can here, just one moment, I'll try and find that slide for us. And that really can show us how that's parsed out. When we developed our own 12:1 EV to public plug ratio, we did not parse that out between level 2 and level 3, but this is what we're recommending. So per registered EV, we are saying that we need 12 plugs in the community. This graph right here is what the CEO is telling us that we need based on that 940,000 EVs registered across the state by 2030. So this is what really they're determining. They also have numbers for single family home chargers. We didn't include those because really within our plan, we are just focusing on that public side.
Did you see Stefan's answers? I said, for May, more than 1 in 10 cars had a plug for light duty for new sales, so around 11%. Okay. Stefan. Ben asks, or Ben said, sure, are vehicles currently being replaced with new vehicles at a rate high enough to meet the 2 to 5% EVs on the road goal?
That's a really good question, Ben. I don't have an answer for you on what our county specific turnover looks like. Or how often people are buying new cars. One thing that I can make an assumption of, which, this is not backed up by any numbers that I have, but, we do have a high amount of affluence within our community, which typically lends to people, holding on to vehicles for a less longer time. And so that might lend itself to a higher turnover rate, meaning that can support that EV goal a bit more.
Perfect. Kim asks, will the CAC partners do some proactive outreach for multifamily properties to get EV chargers, or will it be up to HOAs to organize themselves to get EV charging in place? Proactive outreach, I think, would help motivate HOAs and multifamily buildings to pursue grant funding to get EV chargers installed. It may also be the only way some multifamily buildings will get chargers. HOA boards can be incredibly dysfunctional.
Thanks, Kim. I appreciate that thought. And yeah, that's definitely something that CAC will be taking the lead on. We work very closely with our local government partners, and we know that they typically have the tools to be applying for and going after grants to install on lands that they have access of. But one thing that we are going to be doing is creating some template language for the Charge Ahead grant application, where we can, put all the language out there and then allow those specific HOAs or if it's a business, whatever it might be, to plug and play with some of those hyper specific numbers that we'll need to be working with a point person from that HOA for. So that is in the works, and we do have plans to be really, really taking the lead with the HOAs and making sure that we're providing that utmost support and handholding.
And Mike from Eagle River Water and Sanitation District said that they replace their vehicles every 10 years or 110,000 miles to give an idea of sort of the replacement schedule for them. Mm-hmm. Thanks, Mike. Thank you, Kim. Stefan says Holy Cross will be developing some additional programs specifically for multifamily housing. Would love to partner on the proactive outreach front. Fantastic.
Absolutely, Stefan. And I know that was one of our strategies that we helped develop alongside you because you participated in the task force, but was thinking about, we have a lot of utility incentives for those single family home chargers right now. But we definitely want to make sure that those are extended to multifamily and make sure that those benefits are accessible. So would definitely be happy and willing to partner with you on some of that outreach.
All right, there are no other questions in the chat right now. If anyone has any more questions, feel free to put them in. Gina and I will stick around for another couple of minutes. But otherwise, Gina, I don't know if you want to close things out with any parting words.
Yeah, just thanks to everybody that was involved in this process. This is a really big undertaking, and it's nice to see the plans out in the community, but really that's kind of the tip of the iceberg. Now it's really time to get to implementing. So thanks to everybody. Don't hesitate to reach out if you think it would be helpful for me to do a presentation to your organization and really tailor the presentation and come with some recommendations and requests for your specific organization or entity. I'd be happy to do that. Right now, my time is really being spent disseminating this information for the community, and we will soon kind of switch gears to working on some of those Charge Ahead templates and other resources that we talked about within the strategies. Thanks, Stefan.
Oh, you have a question from Tim. I might have missed this, but can you explain what kind of fees for charging you are considering?
We did not include any regulatory frameworks for local governments within the plan as it relates to fees. That's really going to be something that local governments might want to think about when they do install those public charging plugs, or it's up to the discretion of the person who's installing, right? So if you're an HOA property manager, you get to determine if you're charging your residents for that charging infrastructure. Same thing for everybody else. So we didn't provide any guidance on that in here, because those questions, or how you determine, the answer to that question is really based upon a myriad of factors. Thanks, Lynn. Thanks, Charlotte. Thanks, Timothy. All right, everyone. I'm not seeing anything else. If anything else comes up or you have any other questions, feel free to email Will and I, and we will be sure to follow back up and answer. Thanks.